to talk about now is reconvening together. We're near the end of the mediation process. I mean, this is a critical step, and it's a very tricky step. It can have some things trip up on us. As far as a transition, this can be one of the hardest transitions in the entire mediation process. So we're going to talk about some things we can do, things we maybe shouldn't do in order to make this most effective and move us in the direction that we're headed in terms of agreement. So we're looking at reconvening together as offering mutual gain. What we've done, we've gone through parties' opening statement where we've positioned in the past. We've gone through joint discussion where the power of the present we've dealt with. We've also done the probing the future with caucus, and at the end of caucus I've gotten what I needed to make this step most effective, and that is 2 agendas. I've got an agenda from the complainant. I've got an agenda from the respondent. Now, the respondent has gotten a chance to review. If you remember, look back, we've actually introduced to the respondent complainant's agenda. And I often get asked, why don't we then caucus again and give the complainant a chance to review the issues that are important to the respondent? Here's the answer to that question. The answer to that question is reconvening together. It's not necessarily an issue of balance. Well, she got a chance to hear his stuff. Shouldn't he get a chance to hear hers? Not necessarily. The point of introducing the idea to the respondent of a complainant's agenda, if you remember we went over 3 items, is for the respondent to think about possible options and responses. And again, our goal was, are you willing to discuss? By going to the complainant, bringing in reconvening together, anything that happens in the conversation between them, even if it's a surprise, adds to the effectiveness and the dynamics of the negotiation that's taking place in reconvening. So I don't need to short circuit that. I don't need to go back to the complainant and say, well, here's the things she wants to talk about. Are you willing to discuss them with her? Because if the answer is yes, we would have had a smooth reconvening together. If the answer is no, we still would have had a good or effective reconvening, because the yes or the no are actually the crux of the negotiation. Are you willing? Yes. Are you not? No. I want that negotiation to take place with both of them together. That's why we do this in reconvening together. So we don't do an extra caucus. I also don't do shuttle diplomacy back and forth, because I want them negotiating now. I don't want to solve it all for them, get it all cleared up, and then bring them back in together so we can write this thing. Reconvening is where the negotiation begins. But before we get too far ahead, let's go back to our definition. Let's set the context. Definition of mediation, if you remember, we put this at the beginning of each presentation to set the context. It's a process that empowers 2 people, or more than 2, who's ever at the table, empower people to make an informed decision in their own best interest. We've done the empowerment part. We've done the listening with joint discussion. We've heard from the past. We've developed options for them. We've kind of painted a picture for the future. Now we're into the negotiation process where decisions will be made here and now. That transition between I've generated the agenda to the agreement writing process. This is a critical pivot point. It can seem very short, but there's a lot going on here we don't want to miss. So there's our definition. And as far as steps of the process, mediator's opening statement, MOS, pause, parties, joint discussion, we're at the reconvening together, setting up the empowerment attained in the agreement writing, which is our next process step. So, in caucus, we probed the future. We asked the what-if questions. We explored possibilities. We generated the options. We did the need exploration. We did the option generation. We've created the agenda. I have everything I need to make this step effective. The one thing I need to be careful about now in offering mutual gains is the transition. The offering of the mutual gains is the real negotiation. Notice it hasn't taken place yet. It hasn't taken place in caucus. We were one-on-one. Hasn't taken place in joint discussion, right? Because we were trying to get out of the past into the present. Certainly didn't happen in parties' opening statement because they were stuck in the past. Here is where it happens, where it begins. Let's assume the worst. The issue that's really important right now, that's going to set up the difference between a successful and a non-successful negotiation, is the transition you create. So, we want to watch this very carefully. Let's assume the worst. Let's assume a transition to a no agreement. I've gone through caucus, I've generated agendas, he's got 10 items, she's got 10 items, they don't agree on anything. They are so far apart on every single issue. She's not willing to talk to him about his stuff, he's not willing to, they're just way far apart. My transition now, we're about to go into negotiation. What's to negotiate? They don't agree. So here's what the transition sounds like. I've escorted the complainant back into the room. I've now sat down, centered myself in the center of the table, neutral space between both of them, and I'll say these words. I want to thank you both for meeting with me privately. No agreement. I'm going to say, it seems there are no points on which you both agree. And then I'm going to be silent. Silence can be very uncomfortable. Parties can start to get a little fidgety. Somebody will say something, generally. I may even lay my pen down, sit back in the chair, fold my hands on the table. There's going to be a moment of silence to get a reaction. What do you want to do next is kind of hanging in the air. And a couple of things can happen. Point blank, well, I guess we're finished now. More often than not, that's what I hear. Well, I guess we're finished now. I guess this is over. I can ask, is that what you want to do? We can sign the no agreement if you're finished. Anything else you want to talk about, you want to bring up? But what you've communicated to them is, this is your last ditch effort. If you're going to resolve this here today, you need to do something, and now is the time to do it. That's that silence. That's what's being communicated here, because we're about to leave. And all those things we went through in caucus, all those things we talked about in terms of what impact is it going to have if it doesn't, if what you want doesn't come true, are about to come true. That's what this silence does. A couple of times, sometimes, it can happen. Parties will lean up on the table and someone will say, well, now, come on, really, isn't there anything we can discuss here? And it opens up not only a whole new level of communication, a whole new tone of communication. Their backs are against the wall, they know it, and it's their choice to do whatever they want to do next. That silence can be very, very powerful. Go ahead and write it out. It feels uncomfortable. You need to learn to get used to it before they do. Let that silence wear on them for a little bit. See what happens. Okay? Now, if it is a no agreement and they end up saying, well, I guess we're finished here. Yeah, we're done. Let's go home. Then that's okay. I've got a no agreement form. Let me fill it out for you. I pull out the no agreement form, sign it, fill it out, copy it, give them each a copy. Boom. They're gone. We're done. Finished. But let's assume the best, because we've done a good job. The process has been effective. We've worked the steps very well. All right? And so now our transition is into agreement. I want to thank both of you for meeting with me privately. Well, see, same words. There are several points. Well, there's a bunch of points. There's one point, several. Two's a couple, three's several. There are some points on which both of you agree or both of you wish to discuss. Either one of those, some kind of wording like that. And now your job, critically important here, is to pick one item. That's part of the transition. You are setting the stage, creating the negotiation, and you are going to pick one item. So I'm going to turn to either one of them, complainant. In this case, we're going to call him John. I picked John. John could be the complainant, John could be the respondent, whoever it is. John, one of the things you wanted to talk about was XYZ. I wonder if you could say more about that now. I've got one person talking immediately. So, notice how quickly this all happens. I brought the party in from caucus, set them down. First words out of my mouth is going to create the transition and set the stage, the pivot point into negotiation. It's either going to be no agreement, in which we're done, or it's going to be agreement. I want to thank you both for meeting with me privately. There are a few points in which each of you wanted to discuss, or there are some points of agreement we can discuss. John, one of the things you wanted to talk about was morale. I wonder if you could say more about that. Boom, we're on our way. Negotiation is launched. Pick one, don't sum. That's a little phrase to help you remember. Most of the time, if a mistake is made or something that could cause problems at this critical juncture of negotiation, of launching a difficult negotiation, it's right here at this transition. I've seen a lot of mediators that will sit down at the table and summarize the caucus. They'll come back and they'll say, I want to thank you both for meeting with me privately. There are some few things worth discussing. One of the things you both talked about, and they'll start going through the agendas. Point A, point B, point C. You talked about this, A, B, C, D. You talked about this, A, B, C, D. 10 items here, 10 items there, whatever. And they summarize the whole thing. And then they stop. They put their pen down. And they offer that silence. And that can be dangerous. I've seen many negotiations at that point start to unravel because the mediator did not do an effective transition. Here's what happened. If you come in and summarize what's happened in caucus, this step starts to look remarkably like joint discussion. Remember joint discussion? That we've gone out of the past, we were trying to move into the present. Well, here we're into a future moving mode and we're offering mutual gains. If a summary, summarizing what you've both said, creates in their mind a familiarity to joint discussion, what did we want to happen in joint discussion? We wanted some venting to take place in a controlled environment. I don't want venting taking place now. I don't need it. There may be some of it going to happen, but I don't want to set myself up for it. So summarizing can be dangerous. Now, doesn't mean you can't do it. If you are going to summarize, here's what I would recommend. Thank you for meeting with me privately. There are a couple of things you both wanted to talk about. What you've discussed in caucus, you were concerned about this, you were concerned about that, you were concerned about this, you were concerned about that, you were concerned about this, you were concerned about that. John, you said you were concerned about discussing X, Y, and Z. I wonder if you could say something about that now. Go ahead and summarize if you want to, if it makes you feel comfortable, if it's a part of your style, if that works for you. But at the end of the summary, don't leave it open like joint discussion. Pick one. Set the stage for a good negotiation. Pick one, whichever one you want. We'll talk about how to pick right now. If you recall, our agenda for C that we've been working with out of our caucus time ended up being 3 points. Responsibility challenge, feeling valued, and morale. That's what C wanted to talk about. So I had that agenda to work with. I've also got R's agenda. She wants to talk about support for K, the person who was hired, as well as for her. She wants to talk about the department, including the complainant's attitude, and she wants the EEO complaint dropped. Those are the two agendas I have before me. I know this agenda because I've met with both of them privately. I need to pick where this negotiation is going to go next. If I put them side by side, okay? Now they're not side by side in my notes, but mentally here's what I'm working with because I'm going to pick one. What looks like a good starting point for me is responsibility and challenge. The reason I think that's a good point to begin with is because it's got some similarities and connections to her concern about the department. So in my thinking, I got to pick one. I want to pick one that has the most optimistic chance of them talking well and reaching an agreement on. I don't care if it's the time of day. Whatever something that they can say yes to together creates an atmosphere of cooperation, creates an atmosphere of achievement, creates an atmosphere of negotiation well in a positive direction. Pick something they both agree upon. An easy one that's often available, he says she's a good supervisor, she says he's a good employee. You know, can they both agree he's a good employee? Pick that one. If she's willing to talk about it, it's on the agenda, we'll use that one. But this one, on this agenda, responsibility and challenge, here's my thinking on it. And again, I'm making some judgment calls as the mediator. You will be too. He's concerned about responsibility and challenge. She's concerned about the department's morale and makeup, and particularly his attitude. If I turn to him and say, John, you mentioned that you wanted to discuss more responsibility and more challenging tasks. I wonder if you could say more about that now. Now, he's not surprised by this. He knows this is going to be brought up because we put it on the agenda. We summarized it, we talked about it, we went over it. He's ready to talk about this. So he jumps in. Now, he's talking about, you know, I wanted more responsibility. I really don't feel challenged in my job. I think I would do better with more challenges. And this position offered that. I was excited about it. I didn't get it. She's hearing maybe what's affecting his attitude can be addressed by covering some more responsibilities and maybe challenging tasks. She might be more open to listening to that kind of conversation if she thinks it's connected to something that's important to her. That's the point I'm trying to make here in reconvening together. The issue of negotiation is mutual gain. Will you do this for me if I do this for you? That's the negotiation. Notice we didn't do it anywhere else. Notice we talked about in caucus, if I come in and dump C's agenda on R without getting R's needs, generating an option, there's no negotiation. That's a browbeating session. Well, are you going to help him with responsibility and challenge or not? What's in it for her? She's looking to affect a change in the department. He's looking for more challenges and responsibilities. It may affect his attitude. That's why I picked this one. John, I wonder if you could say a little bit more about responsibilities you were looking for and the challenges you were hoping to find. He jumps in. She listens. I sit back. As long as the conversation's going, they don't even have to be agreeing. But if the tone's good, if they're talking back and forth, it's not deteriorating, we're not doing the one-upmanship stuff, they're talking. They're negotiating. Reconvening is a dangerous time where the mediator, with this fear of wanting to solve the problem, will often talk more. This is the time where they need to be talking, right? Offering mutual gains. I don't need to be offering it. In fact, I don't want to turn to the respondent and say, he's concerned about more responsibilities, he's concerned about more challenges. Is there anything you can do? I've made the offer. Let him make the offer. She's going to see a connection. She'll start a conversation. They get to negotiate. I sit back and say nothing. Let them deal with it. Here's probably what's going to happen, and typically does. He's going to talk about responsibility and challenge. She's going to be willing to listen to it because she sees some connection to what she wants out of this. That's why I picked it. Her response then isn't, yeah, I'll do that for you. Her response is, well, John, I might consider that. There are some things that we could do to maybe give you a little more challenge, a little more responsibility. But what I need for you is, or what I need from you is, see what she's done? She's offered on the table another mutual gain. I'll be willing to do that for you if. That's the crux of negotiation. That's the crux of what's happening here in this step. I'll be willing to help you with that, but what I need from you, John, is I need you to support Kay. Now, I know you're not happy with the selection, and I know you wanted that job, but, I think Kay has some talent, some skills, some new blood for the department. It's going to be good. It's going to change the attitude. It's going to change the morale. John, I think this is going to be good for all of us, but I need your help in this. You're a leader. People look up to you. Would you be willing to offer some support to Kay in this? Now, what's he thinking? I might get more responsibility and I might get some challenges if I help. Yes, no. Whichever the answer is, they're negotiating. They're offering mutual gains to each other. I'm sitting back, letting them talk. I'm monitoring. We'll talk a little bit more about the dynamics and what can possibly happen. But most of the time, she's going to run up to one of her items, lay it on the table, and see what he's willing to do. He says, yeah, I'm willing to do that. And then, I'll say, the other thing you've talked about was, now we can introduce, I can introduce feeling valued. I can introduce something else, whatever it is. You wanted to talk about morale. Could you say more about that? I can redirect and refocus in terms of the conversation. But what has happened, what I have accomplished, what the process has allowed, and what I have set up by picking one is I've created the possibility of a good negotiation taking place. So if you're going to summarize, go ahead and summarize. But at the end, pick one item, launch this thing, get it started. Now, what if you pick a bad one? What if you pick one and say, there's no way, John. You have been screwing up for the past 6 months. I am sick and tired of there is no way you have earned any kind of, now she's doing the pound of flesh thing going on. All right. The dynamics that are taking place in communication can look a lot like joint discussion in terms of communication flow. Again, that's why I didn't want to do the summary, because there's so many similarities going on here to remind them of joint discussion. I don't want another joint discussion. But the communication dynamics can be the same. So the communication skill you want to use is to continue monitoring, redirecting, and refocus. The advantage now, doing it only when necessary, when things start to deteriorate, you picked one, launched it, and it began to sink right away, you start redirecting and refocusing. Okay, well, excuse me for a moment. You talked about responsibility, and that's something we can pick up later. You don't seem to be really, what I'm saying is you don't really seem to be too willing to do this right now, but I don't want to say that. So let's set that one aside for a moment. John, something else you talked about was feeling valued, or talked about that. I'll pick another one. What I've done is I've redirected, refocused. I've stopped this bickering back and forth. I've stopped her slamming him or him slamming her. I've redirected the focus to me, and I've picked another item. That's why that agenda is so valuable. I've got 6 things to pick on. I can turn to John and ask him to talk about one. I can turn to her and ask her to pick one. One of the things you were concerned about, wanted to talk more about, was support for Kay. Or I wonder if you could say more about that. This may continue on a downhill slide, but I have effectively monitored and used my communication skills to get them moving. This may fail, but at least I've stopped the deterioration and headed in a different direction. They still may fail, but at least I've done what I need to do. So when necessary, if it's not necessary, don't do it. Sit there and shut up. Let them talk. Let them negotiate. He agrees, she disagrees. If she, well, John, I don't know. I'm not going to jump in and say, well, let's talk about this. Well, John, I don't know. I mean, it's been pretty bad, your behavior the past few. Let them talk about it. The tone's good. They're not badgering each other. Yeah, you're right. I have. Or no, I haven't. Or they're talking. Let it go. Next one, mediator. The reason most mediators jump in and want to talk is because they start feeling that problem-solving reflex. We've been here for 6 hours, and we're so close to agreement, and they sounded so nice in caucus. Now they're at each other's throat. You know what? Here, let me jump in. Let me solve it. Let me orchestrate this so that you two are running smoothly through these things so that I can get an agreement. It's not about you. It's about them. And if you take this negotiation away from them, you're harming the empowerment process. They're going to make an informed decision. It may not be what you like, but they're going to make an informed decision. So don't jump in. Let them talk. Okay? So dynamics can be quite a bit like joint discussion. You're going to use the same communication skills in order to keep things moving, but the advantage that you have now with redirecting is you've got that caucus and agenda at your disposal. You didn't have that at your disposal with joint discussion. You've got something that now you can refocus them on. So if disagreements happen, they go through You've got 6 items. They disagree on 5 of them. The only one they agree on is morale stinks. Well, we're not going to sit down and write an agreement that says both parties agree that morale stinks. We're not going to do that. So I may caucus again. There may be 2 or 3 items they do agree on, but they're hung up on 1. I'm going to caucus again. But this time, the advantage I have is I have their need before me, and I have the future that we've painted together before me. And what I do in a second caucus is refocus them back on their need, back on their future. Now, what if something new crops up out of this whole discussion? They're talking back and forth. I want more responsibility. Okay, but I won't support K. And besides, you know, this is going so well. I want a new Jaguar. Can I have a 2002 Jaguar convertible blue, nice wide tires with a 5-speaker stereo system? There's something new on the table here. We need to this was not brought up in caucus. This might be a good time to caucus again. And what I need to do is refocus, take this issue, find out what the need is, all those steps we went through in generating options, uncovering need, exploring need. I've got to go through with this new issue. Okay? Your concern is a new Jaguar. What impact is this going to have? What if you get it? What if you don't? Are you going to be willing to throw away the future we've talked about if she's not willing to give you this new check? I'm going to go through all those steps. If it connects with his future, if it doesn't, he gets to make the decision where this all fits. Yeah, I was being ridiculous. I just got caught up in the moment. I think I want to go the other direction now. Okay, so we come back. Jaguar's off the table. Move forward. We're done. So caucusing, again, can have a couple of different effects. I mean, I can do it because they're in disagreement and I want to refocus them on the things they talked about, but I can also recaucus again if there are surprises. I've got to find out what the need is. What's the need driving the demand? What's the need to drive this Jaguar is what I got to find out, okay? Reality testing also becomes another option for me if I caucus again. We can paint the picture. What's going to happen if you don't get this, you do get this. What's the next step if we don't settle this here today? Well, we're going to go forward with an EEO. How long does that take? Is that expensive? Did you plan on spending your entire retirement fund on this case with your expensive lawyer? I'm never going to ask that way, but questions about getting them to think about, is that a reality they really want to pursue? But I only need to do it if it's necessary. Reality testing is only necessary if parties won't get off the dime. They're stuck. And then I can paint the picture of what's going to happen if we continue down this path. Is that a path you want to pursue? Again, it's their choice. But I get to ask the question, is it a path you want to pursue? Handling agreements. Let's say things are going really smoothly. I mean, this is a great, we've been there 6 hours. Gone through the agendas, had a great transition, smooth right into it. John, I wonder if you'd say something about responsibility and challenge. He does. She says yes. John, I need you to support Kay. Okay, I'll do that. Feeling valued. You know, I painted a picture what that would look like. He's thought about what he wants her to do. She says, you know, John, you are valuable. It's just been tough times now. Yeah, okay, he's satisfied with that. Here's what starts to happen. We start to unfold. We start to see that there's some agreements back and forth. How do I handle that? We're actually starting to create, this is starting to meld into agreement writing. So what do I need to be doing that I don't hinder negotiation? We still got, what, all the other items on the agenda. You got a list of 10. You got 9 more items to go through. Or actually 19, 10 on her side, 10 on his side. I still got all of this to go through. So, you know, we don't have an agreement yet, but I need to do something to keep this negotiation going through these points of agreement. So here's what you need to do. Transition to agreement writing. I really need more responsibility. I'm looking for more. John, I can do that for you. In fact, I can hook you up with, I can create another position, an assistant to Kay. If you're willing to work with Kay and support her, I can create a position that would link you up. You know what, John? Your expertise, your experience could really be an asset to Kay, and she has some management experience I think that you could learn from that would set you up in a career path for the next promotion. This is starting to sound good. I don't want to put too much pressure on them, and I don't want to sound too excited. I think in my first mediation, when it actually, they finally agreed on something, you agree? I pulled out this piece of paper, I laid it down, pulled my pen out, let's write it. I was so excited. Calm down a little bit, okay? It's their agreement. Don't put too much pressure. Don't sound so enthusiastic. Yes, you're happy, but keep that neutral face going. So here's how we do it. Sounds like there's something, excuse me for a moment. It sounds like in terms of responsibility, there's a possibility of a position here of responsibility and challenge. John, you like that idea? Yes, I do. So that'll meet your need of, yes. And you're willing to create this position? Yes, I am. It sounds like there's a point of agreement. Let me jot this down, right? I don't want to create any pressure for them. So I want to keep this smooth. Let me jot this down just so we don't lose it. We've got other things to talk about, but I don't want to lose this point. Let me jot this down. Then I'll pull my paper out and I'll start to write. Now, I'll add this caveat to relieve the pressure. Let me jot this down just to capture it so we don't lose it. Keeping in mind, this is not an agreement until you both read it and sign it. Okay? So I've removed the pressure, I'm writing something down, but I'm also communicating that just because they said yes to something doesn't mean they're locked into it forever. They can still put this as a negotiation chip if they want to. They can back out at any time. No pressure, but I want to keep the momentum going. Let me capture this. And then how you write it, how you capture it, we do in agreement writing, and you'll see the effectiveness of what we're trying to accomplish and how we write this down. Some very important things going on there as well. So I'm going to jot this down. Keep in mind, this isn't an agreement until both of you read it and sign it, and don't be too quick on the pen. What I do, and this is just my style, every mediator has a style, and you can develop your own, but I tend to write things down that they agree upon in kind of real quick rough draft form on a piece of paper. Let me capture that on a piece of paper. It's not the official form. I still have the form in my file. So I'm writing it basically in my notes and kind of getting a rough sketch on it. I will get the detailed wording when I'm actually moving into agreement writing, which are all those subtle things going on there. That's just been effective for me in dealing with that. It keeps it in rough draft form, takes the pressure off, and then I get to write more clearly and pay more attention to my spelling when I actually get to the official form. I do. One thing I never do, and I would never recommend for a mediator, to walk in the reconvening session, sit down, and pull out that agreement form and lay it down before we even start, before even a word is said about the transition, or to come out and say, you know, there are a couple of things you both agreed upon that you want to talk about, and pull out that agreement form. It sends the wrong messages. It focuses way too much on the agreement and not the negotiation. The negotiation, offering mutual gain, is what's important right now, not getting it on paper. So keep it in the file. Keep it under your folder, keep it in the back of your notebook, whatever it is. Pull it out when you start to hear points of agreement. Writing down those things, a lot of things happening in terms of getting it from their words, their mouth to paper. Empowerment attained. They are going to make decisions. They are in the process of making decisions right now and reconvening together that will set up how this thing is actually going to look, and what that document represents, in fact, is empowerment was attained. Whether it's agreement or no agreement, they've made a decision. That was your goal. Okay? And we'll talk about all those details when we get to agreement writing. See you there.